Hi, welcome to section 9.6, percent of increase and decrease. In this section, we're going to get another formula with some similar pieces in it, and we will use it like we have the others to calculate some things. One of them will, again, they'll give us 2 out of the 3 pieces of information, and we will solve for the third. Let's start off with our vocab. Our percent of change is the ratio of the amount of change to the original amount. And the formula is the percent of change is equal to the amount of change over the original amount. The amount of changes, think of it as if I have a price of a shirt at one price and it changes to a different price because it is either increased in price or lowered in price, that will be my amount of change, the difference. The percent of increase, again, by looking at those two dollar amounts, you should be able to tell if it's the original amount is smaller than the new amount, then it is an increase. If the price has gone down for a discount, then it is a percent of decrease. So again, on these two, all we're looking at, whether it's an increase or decrease, we're just looking at the original price or the original number and the new number and deciding if it's an increase in the number, it's a percent of increase. If the new number or new amount is lower than the original amount, then it would be a percent of decrease. Okay, let's go through our steps. There's 3 steps to finding the percent of increase or decrease. Our example number 1 says, find the percent of increase or decrease from 16 to 12. Looking at that, my original price is 16. The new price is 12. 16 to 12. That is a decrease, so I know my percent is going to be a percent of decrease. Step 1, I need to find the amount of the change. The change is the original price subtracted from the new price. 16 minus 12 is 4. So I take that number and set up my ratio. So step 2 is set up the ratio. My amount of change or my amount of decrease will be my numerator. My original amount is my denominator. So setting up my ratio, my amount of change was 4. I put 4 as my numerator. My original amount on the price was 16. Again, if you read the question, it says find the percent of increase or decrease from 16 to 12. So my original amount is 16, and 16 becomes my denominator. So my ratio is 4 over 16. And step 3, find the decimal form. Basically here what you're doing is either set it up as a percent proportion to get the percent, or you can do neato and then take the decimal and turn it into a percent by moving 2 spaces to the right. So a change from 16 to 12 is a percent decrease of 25%. Okay. Here's one more example, same format. I just wanted to give you an extra one, just showing you an increase. So the question here says find the percent of increase or decrease from 45 to 54. Okay. First I got to figure out the change, the amount of change. It went from 45 to 54. That's a change of 9. I then set up my ratio, and since 45 to 54 is an increase, it's an amount of increase, I put 9 as my numerator, 45 as my denominator. In this case, I can simplify before I use neato to change it into a percent. And it's 1/5, and then I write it as a decimal or finally as a percent. Again, you can use the percent proportion, the percent equation, or neato to get it to a percent. Okay? Unless it specifically asks you to use one of those, you can choose whichever one you want. So that's it for the first concept. Now we're going to use it in an example where, again, they're not going to give us both the original amount and the new amount. They're going to give us the percent of change or the percent of increase or decrease, and then usually the original amount. But first, it's your turn. Try these. Be sure to write them down in your notebook. Okay, using a percent of increase or decrease. Example number 1, find the new amount using the given information. 120% increase of 95. Okay. In this case, we know the percent of change. It was an increase. It was 120%. We know the original amount was 95. We just don't know what the amount of change was. So what we have to do first is set up our percent of a change equation. Remember, that equation is percent of change equals the amount of change over the original amount. So let's put our numbers in. Okay, again, for step 1, we know it's 120%, but we want to change it to a decimal. So when I move it over 2, it becomes 1.20. Equals, we don't know what the amount of change is. So that's going to become my x. I just left it as an amount of change now because I figured it'd be easier for you to see what we're figuring out or determining. And then I know my original price was 95, so that becomes my denominator. Step 2. In this step, again, we just solve. Okay, so my original problem was 1.20 equals x over 95. Well, I want to get x alone, remember? So in order to get x alone, I need to get rid of the denominator of 95. So I multiply each side by 95. They cancel on the side of the x, leaving me with 1x. And then 95 times 1.20 gives me 114. Now here's the tricky part. This is not your final answer. What you have found was the amount of change. So 114 is the amount of change. The question asks you to find the new amount. So we had the original, I have the amount of change that I just calculated. I need my final answer needs to be what the new amount is. So step 3, in step 3, we either add the amount of change if it's a percent of increase, or we subtract from the original amount if it's a percent of decrease. In our case, it said it was an increase of 95, or 120% increase of 95. So my amount of change of 114, I need to add to our original amount. So I take the 114, I add it to 95, and my new amount is 209. Okay, so again, in step 2, what I find, remember, I'm finding the amount of change. It's not my final answer. It's not my new amount. I have the original, I have the percent of change, and I have the amount of change. So in step 3, if it's a percent of increase, I take my amount of change and I add it to the original amount. If it happens to be a percent of decrease, then I take my amount of change and I subtract it from the original amount. Okay. All right, your turn. Again, here in problem A, it says a 40% decrease of 85. Okay, so my original is going to be 85. When I set up my percent of change equation, or my percent of increase or decrease equation, it's going to get you the amount of change. And in this case, since it's a decrease, that number you find, you will need for step 3 to subtract it from 85. All right. Good luck. One last piece, a little bit of a homework. In your homework, what I'd like you to do is start scouring the internet and print off a menu. We are coming up on a section of tips and sales tax, and I would like you to find a menu online.